DDT. In the 1940s, farmers believed they had found the perfect weapon against insects. It was called DDT, a white powder that killed almost every pest it touched. It was cheap, it lasted for months after a single application, and it worked on everything. During World War II, the US military used it to wipe out mosquitoes carrying malaria. After the war, farmers across America began spraying it on every crop they had. By the 1950s, DDT was everywhere, sprayed on cotton fields, fruit orchards, vegetable crops, and even school playgrounds. Then the problems started showing up. DDT did not break down. Once it was sprayed on a crop, it stayed. It soaked into the soil, washed into rivers, and entered the bodies of fish. The fish were eaten by birds. The birds laid eggs, but the eggshells were now so thin from the contamination that they collapsed before the chicks could hatch. Entire bird populations began collapsing. Bald eagles, the national symbol of America, nearly went extinct. Then researchers found DDT inside human fatty tissue, in mother's breast milk, and in the fat of babies who had never been anywhere near a farm. The chemical had moved invisibly through the food chain into almost every human body on the planet. In 1972, after 30 years of use, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency finally banned DDT. The ban came 3 years after researcher Rachel Carson's book *Silent Spring* documented exactly what was happening to wildlife across the country. The unguarded PTO shaft. On a farm, a power takeoff shaft, called a PTO, is the rotating metal rod that connects a tractor to farm equipment like mixers, elevators, and corn shellers. It spins at up to 1,000 revolutions per minute. For decades, these shafts ran completely exposed, with no cover or shield. The problem was simple: clothing catches. A loose sleeve, a jacket hem, or loose trousers. The moment any fabric brushed against the spinning shaft, it was pulled in instantly. The shaft didn't slow down. It spun at full speed and wrapped the person around it in less than a second. Arms were torn off. Bodies were dragged in. Death happened before anyone nearby could even reach the power switch. In November 2002, a 45-year-old farm worker was killed when his clothing became entangled in an unguarded PTO shaft while preparing feed for a dairy operation. In 2016, a 54-year-old female farmer was killed when her sleeve was caught in the unguarded shaft of a corn elevator. A 29-year-old farmhand, a 68-year-old dairy farmer. The cases go on for pages. The solution, a plastic safety guard around the shaft, cost almost nothing to manufacture. But for decades, equipment was sold and used without them. PARAQUAT. PARAQUAT was introduced in 1962 and was immediately celebrated as a revolution in farming. It killed every weed it touched by destroying the plant's ability to photosynthesize, essentially starving it of sunlight at the cellular level. Unlike some other herbicides, it broke down quickly in the soil, which led farmers to assume it was safe. However, that assumption was wrong. PARAQUAT's warning label carries a simple message: one sip can kill. There is no antidote. If swallowed, it travels to the lungs and slowly destroys them over several days. The person gradually suffocates, and nothing can be done to stop it. In parts of Asia and the Pacific, PARAQUAT became one of the most common methods of suicide because it was both highly lethal and inexpensive. But that was not the only danger. Researchers found that chronic low-level exposure, the kind farmers experienced season after season while spraying their fields, could destroy specific neurons in the brain responsible for producing dopamine. The loss of these neurons causes Parkinson's disease, an incurable degenerative condition that gradually affects a person's ability to move, speak, and think clearly. Studies found that farmers who used PARAQUAT were 250% more likely to develop Parkinson's disease than people who had never been exposed to it. The counties in America with the highest rates of Parkinson's deaths are also the counties where PARAQUAT use is heaviest. As a result of these concerns, 74 countries have banned PARAQUAT. The steam threshing machine. Before modern combines, farmers used steam-powered threshing machines to separate grain from wheat stalks. A steam engine powered the entire machine, and that engine relied on a high-pressure boiler filled with water that was heated to produce steam. The boiler had to be maintained at exactly the right pressure. Too little pressure, and the machine would stop working. Too much pressure, and it would explode. And it exploded often. In the fall of 1889 alone, roughly 50 men working in threshing crews across the American Midwest were killed in boiler explosions. Newspapers of the time described boiler failures as a routine tragedy. When a boiler exploded, it did not simply catch fire. The pressurized steam and shredded metal turned the engine into a bomb. Iron plates became deadly shrapnel, and scalding steam erupted in every direction. Men working within 50 feet had virtually no chance of survival. In one documented explosion in North Dakota in 1891, the blast destroyed everything within a wide radius of the machine. The solution eventually came with the gasoline tractor, which began replacing steam engines on farms in the early 1900s. As gasoline tractors became more affordable throughout the 1920s, steam threshing machines almost completely disappeared. Lead ARSENATE. From 1890 to 1940, the single most widely used pesticide on American apple orchards was lead arsenate. It was sprayed on fruit trees to kill the codling moth, a pest that devastated apple crops. As a result, apple production increased dramatically, and the American fruit industry grew into a global exporter. The problem was that lead arsenate was exactly what its name suggested: lead and arsenic, two of the most toxic substances known to human biology. Arsenic accumulates in the human body over time, while lead causes irreversible brain damage, particularly in children. Farmers who sprayed lead arsenate for years absorbed it through their skin, breathed it in as a mist, and carried it home on their boots and clothing. A 1938 study of orchard workers in Washington state found significantly elevated mortality rates among farmers who had worked with lead arsenate. The corn picker. The mechanical corn picker was introduced in the 1930s and completely changed American farming. Before its invention, harvesting corn required enormous amounts of manual labor. The corn picker automated the entire process by grabbing the stalk, pulling the ear of corn free, and moving it quickly into a collection bin. The machine was also extraordinarily dangerous. The picking mechanism, the rollers that grabbed the stalk and pulled the ear free, had no way of telling the difference between a corn stalk and a human hand. If a farmer reached in to clear a jam, the rollers grabbed whatever they touched and pulled it in. They crushed and pulled until there was nothing left to pull. Corn picker amputations became so common in rural America that the injury earned its own informal name among farm surgeons: corn picker hand. Entire hands, wrists, and forearms were lost in these machines during harvest seasons. Some farmers even lost both arms. Safety guards were eventually added, and modern combines replaced standalone corn pickers by the 1970s. But for 4 decades, the corn picker removed the hands of thousands of American farmers while removing their corn. The grain auger. A grain auger is a large metal tube with a rotating spiral blade inside, known as a screw conveyor, that is used to move grain from one location to another. The spiral spins at high speed, pulling grain upward through the tube and depositing it into storage bins. On large American farms, augers can be 40 to 50 feet long and move tons of grain every hour. The spiral blade inside has no mercy. If a farmer slipped and fell into the intake opening at the bottom, the rotating screw would grab whatever entered it: feet, legs, clothing, and pull it in. Once something was caught in the spiral, it could not be pulled back out. The machine had to be stopped, but stopping took time, and by then the damage was often already done. Many farmers suffered leg amputations because of auger accidents. Children were at particular risk. On family farms, children often worked alongside their parents during harvest season. A child who slipped near an operating auger could be pulled in before an adult even had time to react. Safety guards and intake covers were eventually required by law, but for decades grain augers operated without them. The early tractor no rollover protection. For most of the 20th century, farm tractors had no rollover protection whatsoever. The operator sat in an open seat on a heavy machine, no cage, no bar, no structure above them. If the tractor rolled, which happened frequently on uneven ground, steep hillsides, and soft soil, the operator was pinned underneath thousands of pounds of metal. Tractor rollovers became the single leading cause of death in American agriculture. Thousands of farmers were killed every year. The death was usually immediate. The weight of the machine simply crushed whoever was beneath it. The fix was simple and cheap. A rollover protection structure, called ROPS, was a steel bar or cage bolted above the operator's seat. If the tractor rolled, the ROPS hit the ground first and held the machine off the operator. It cost almost nothing to manufacture relative to the price of the tractor. Sweden made ROPS mandatory on new tractors in 1959. The United States did not require it on agricultural tractors until 1985, 26 years later. If you enjoyed this, subscribe and drop your idea for the next one in the comments.